Hey everybody, welcome to this chart topper dance tutorial. I am John Merritt from Born to Produce, and together we are going to make this tune.
The way you're moving with me. Everybody's here to find the love.
So this is going to be loads of fun, and the first 4 lessons are completely free, so let's get on with it. So just a quick note before we get started, it's definitely going to be much better for you if you've already completed our beginner tutorial, because that covers sort of the basic layout of Cubase, how everything sort of works, and it also explains the basic functions like compression and EQ. As in this course, I'm not going to focus so much on the explanation of how a particular plugin works, and might do in some plugins that we haven't covered before, but things like EQ and compression, I'll stick to explaining why we're using it in a particular scenario, so from a production point of view, but I'm not going to go into explaining how a compressor works. That sort of stuff is all covered in the beginner course. Alright, so with that all being said, let's get on with it. So let's start with prompt for project location, and we're going to go create empty. And for me, I'm just going to make a folder on my desktop, so you can put yours wherever you like. Obviously, you don't have to put it on the desktop. Now you can see already I've got my BTP Cubase 11 chart topper dance tutorial folder there. So that is from the downloaded zip. You'll see that it's got the tutorial files and the work files in there. The work files contain all the audio and everything, but I actually want to create a new folder. I'm going to call it Do It To Me, because that's the name of the track. Hit enter and then select folder, and that's just going to set the project's location. And very quickly, before we get into bringing in kicks and drums and stuff, I just want to go up to project and check that we got the same settings. So I'm going to go to project setup, and we want to be working at 96K and 24-bit. The reason for this being that we're going to be recording vocals for this particular track, and we're going to be then manipulating those vocals in pitch and time stretching stuff as well. So we want the maximum quality, so no quality is left when we start time stretching and pitch shifting our vocals. Alright, so over in the left hand zone in the media tab, we're going to go and find the work files folder. So again, I showed you mine, I've just put on the desktop. Yours may be anywhere depending on where you decided to extract the main folder, the BTP Cubase 11 chart topper folder, and in the work files you got the audio folder. Now very quickly, if you're working on a sort of smaller screen, sometimes this, when you click on the audio folder, you won't actually see the files down here. If you do, that's fine, no problem. If you don't, what you'll need to do is sort of come down to the bottom, and where you see the cursor change into that, the double vertical arrow, just click and this sort of window will appear. Now normally you'll bring your mouse down to the bottom there and then click and this will appear. Anyway, hopefully you've already got this. So the first thing we want to do is add our kick. Now our kick, this one, and remember, if you're not hearing your kick here, you can turn on autoplay, that button there. Then it will automatically play the sample that you click. Now this kick, 01 BODATH, is actually from the new Cubase 11 loops and samples folder. It's on this one here, the Tech House library. Some very nice kicks in there, just so you know. Obviously, I've put it in the work files just for those of you who are perhaps following along in Cubase 9.5 or 10, etc. So I'm going to go back to my work files now, just in the audio folder. I'm going to right click my kick and go create sampler track. Just going to zoom out a bit, and now I use control, I hold control and then use my mouse wheel to zoom in and out, because you can sort of choose where you want to zoom in and out by just putting your mouse there. Just makes it a bit sort of easier to navigate, but it's up to you how you do it. And I want to start from bar 5, so I suggest you'll start from the same place as well, just so we're all in the same sort of area. And let's just set the loop region over the first bar. If you haven't already, you want to change this to adapt to zoom rather than bar or beat, or use quantize. And I also like to have the separate transport panel showing, which you can get to by hitting F2, or you can go to transport and then click transport panel there. Just means you've got an extra play button up the top here. Just a quick note, you can actually customize this, because this is like really sort of long. We don't need all of this info. So if you want to change the size of it, you can just go to the settings gear icon here at the end. Just move that along a bit. And we don't need the locators. So that's fine, that's just shortened it enough that we can just stick it on the end there. Okay, so providing you sort of have followed along in the beginner's course, you'll know that to get some MIDI playing, we just need to draw in a blank MIDI segment and then double click to go into it. So I have Cubase set so that when I double click on an event, say a bit of audio or the MIDI segments, for example, it pops up in a separate window. It just means you have a bit more space. Very quickly, if you want to do that, you can go to Preferences, and then under Editors, just go to here where it says double click opens editor in window. So by default it opens in the lower zone, but it's sort of easier if you've got it in a separate window. So that's just my personal preference, and that's how you change it if you want to. Right, so let's draw in 3 kicks. Going to go for C3 because that's the natural pitch. Better turn snap on. I'm just going to undo that. Turn snap on, and let's draw in 4 kicks. So obviously this is a sort of house type beat. That's fine, but let's just change the tempo. I want it slightly quicker than this, so you can change the tempo on either transport panel, the one down the bottom, which is automatically turned on by default, or the separate one. Just click and drag that up. We're going to stick it on 124 BPM. It's just going to give a little more energy than 120 BPM, which is just a little bit too slow for house music, but it being a pop track, we don't want it to be too fast either. So okay, great, we got a kick. So now I want to add a hat to go along with it to make this into more of a house beat. And for a house beat, you need an offbeat hat. So let's go back home on the left-hand zone media tab, go to file browser, which should take us automatically to our work files because that's where we were last, and I got open hat 3. Now I can right click and create another sampler track, or I can be kind of lazy and duplicate the kick track, and then with this highlighted, make sure this is highlighted, and then you can just drag your open hat into it. Now you've got the hat in there playing at the same time as the kick, but obviously we want this to play on the offbeat, so let's just go into the MIDI, select all 4 notes in there, MIDI notes, and just drag them over so they are now on the offbeat. There we go. And of course it gets a little bit confusing if you keep it the same name, so let's just rename it. Just going to call it open hat, shift and enter will rename the MIDI parts as well, and I'm just going to change the name of this because it's a bit annoying being so long. Just going to call it kick, shift and enter, and then we go, nice and tidy. So one thing I haven't done yet, which was actually super important and I should have done really first, but no problem, is on the kick, the first element that we brought into our project, I want to turn this down. Anywhere around about -9 to 10 is fine, and this is just going to ensure that as we keep adding elements to our track, that the overall volume in our project isn't going to get too loud, and we're going to start running into issues because things are getting either like over compressed or oversaturated or whatever as we go further on down the line. It's what's referred to as gain staging, but as long as we set the first element and the loudest element, which is the kick, to a reasonable volume and use that to balance everything else that we add to our track, i.e. when I bring in the hat, for example, I don't turn up the kick to meet the hat's volume, I turn down the hat to sort of balance with the kick's volume. So let's just do that now. And for now that's fine, no problem, let's just leave it like that. Now one thing I will do is just tweak this, so let's go into the channel settings for the hat, let's have a listen. Okay, so we can see that there's some low end information in this hat, so some low frequencies, which obviously aren't necessary in a hat sample. We only need these sort of high mids, so really from about this range onwards. So let's use our filter. So I'm just going to go in here, select 48 dB slope. Obviously we don't want to go too far. We want the main body of the hat, but somewhere around there, so we're just filtering out anything really below about sort of 300-400 hertz, just to tidy up the low end of that. And actually title over there, we can just unsolo that, just brighten this up a bit as well. You can always bypass the EQ to see what you've done, so that's without. And it just brightens up that hat, no problem. Might want to turn it down a little bit now because we just boosted the high end. Okay, somewhere around there is fine. All right, so let's get our clap or snare in. And again, we can, by the way, instead of constantly resizing these, you can actually just click this little down arrow here and select zoom to tracks. Right, so let's find our clap snare in the work files as well, so you can hear that. And let's go and create a sampler track. This time we'll draw this in, and let's just go into this. Now you'll notice actually before we go into there, you'll see that in the sampler track, the clap snare has a bit of a sort of different dynamic. So it starts off, it's got like a sort of mini build-up, if you like, going into the actual sound. So this sort of rise up and then it sort of hits. So this part here is really where you want it to start on the beat. And this kind of gives it a kind of snap into it. So we're going to need to just position this correctly. So actually, do you know what? This might be easier if we do it in audio form rather than doing it as a sampler track. So actually, let's just get rid of that. Sorry if you just copied me. So what we're going to do is we're going to click the clap and snare and drag this into our projects window. Just close that lower zone for now and the right hand zone. And let's just zoom in a bit. So the clap in dance music, or house music I should say, always falls on the second and fourth beat. So that is the second beat. And what we want to do is just turn off our snap. And as I mentioned on the waveform, the actual sort of clap or the crunch part of it needs to start there. So we want that on the beat. Let's just have a quick listen. I'm going to turn this down a bit as well. So you can hear that makes sense. What we can do instead of trying to place it the same way on the fourth beat is we're going to turn our snap back on and we're going to change this to grid relative. So when I copy this over, it keeps it in the same relative position. So you can see that we've still got that lead in to the clap. Let's just play this. Now you'll notice that it's got a kind of weird ringiness to it as well, this clap. I don't really want that. What we actually want, well, we're going to replace the high end of this with another layer, but what we're going to do is remove the unwanted frequencies from this. We're going to take that ringiness out. What we want is the sort of mid-range punch of this sound, the kind of clap part. So let's just go into the channel settings and we're going to use the high cut and low cut filters. Let's change them both to 48 dB slopes. And let's just do the low cut first. See, we got this low end information here. We don't really want that, so let's just bring this up. Somewhere around there. Now we're going to try and get rid of that ringiness by using the high cut. So you can bypass the filters by pressing the little bypass button there. And although it does take out a little bit of the sort of clap sound, the high frequencies of it, it still keeps the body of the snare, which is the most important thing in this case. So that's fine. We're going to leave it like that. What we're going to do is we're going to layer it with another snare, which we'll do now, and we're going to go to our right hand zone and use snare 01 from the work files. Let's right click this. This we can use as a sampler track. That's fine. So let's just unsolo our clap snare and draw in a MIDI segment. Let's go into it, double click, and let's draw in our, sorry, it's probably a bit loud because I haven't turned it down yet. And now we've got our sort of overlay on our clap snare. So, and you can hear what that's doing is just adding the sort of high end back into that snare. So let's just solo both of those. Oh, just so you know, when you're zoomed in like that and you're playing it and it starts scrolling along, if that really annoys you like it does me, then you can turn that auto scroll off by clicking that button there. You want that to be plain sort of dark grey, not highlighted, and then when you press play it won't suddenly be jumping all over the place. Right, so that's practically it for that. This will all be balanced out and everything. It sounds a bit raw at the moment, so don't worry about that too much. It's fine. Let's just check. Just want to check the starting position of that snare to make sure it is dead on. So I'm just going to highlight this track, go to the lower zone, and let's have a look in the sampler track. So yeah, that starts right at the very beginning. So that's absolutely fine, no problem. There we go, we've got a basic beat. Now, one last thing that I want to do in this starting lesson is just add a layer to this kick. So at the moment it's nice, but I think the initial hit of the kick, I want that to have a bit more body or a bit more sort of mid-range punch. Now later on we will be tweaking and mixing the kick and stuff like that, but even right at this early stage I can tell it's just a little bit weedy when it comes to the initial attack of the kick. So let's duplicate this kick track. Now I'm going to change this straight away and just call it kick layer. Hold shift and hit enter, and then we're going to make sure this is selected, and we're going to go to our right hand zone and find our kick top layer in the work files in the audio folder, drag that in because this kick has a nice bit of sort of mid-range punch at the start there, and then we're just going to EQ most of that out. So at the moment obviously it sounds horrible. Those two kicks mixed together, not very good, so we're going to go in to the channel settings of our kick layer and use our low cut, change this to 48 dB again, and we're just going to filter out the very sort of low frequencies. Let's just play with this. And let's just solo this completely on its own, so we've just got the kick layer soloed. So that's about where we want it. We just don't want any sub really coming through. Just the sort of snap of the kick. And let's bring in our normal kick now. So that's the original kick on its own, and then this is with the layer. Going to turn that down a bit. We don't want to add like tons of mid-range punch to it, just a little bit. So without, with. Just gives it a little bit more body, so that's fine. Let's leave that as it is now. That's great. And we've got our sort of very, very basic drum beat. Tell you what, very quickly as well, we'll just both of these are just a little bit too loud, both snare sounds, so I'm just actually going to hold control, select both of these tracks, and then I'm going to hold alt and shift, which turns on quick link. I'll just show you the mixer quickly. So this is the mixer, and if I hold alt and shift, or option and shift, if you're on a Mac, you'll see that the quick link button, whenever I press it on my keyboard, the quick link button lights up. So we're just going to use that functionality to turn down both the snare and the clap at the same time. So if I hold alt and shift and turn them down, you'll actually find that both of these have been turned down at the same time. So that's fine for now. Obviously this is all going to need a balance, and it's all very, very early stages, so it all sounds very raw, but we have got our startings of a beat. Let's just quickly grab that and hit Control or Command D, just so we've got 4 bars of this, because in the next lesson we're going to be making our melody. All right, so that's it for the first lesson. Thank you very much for watching, guys and girls. I'll see you in the next one.